it's finding that pace that you can make the bike work hard enough for Rich to be able to do what he needs to do, but not too fast where you can no longer cognitively figure out what you're doing on the bike.
I think that Tyres like the perfect British stick it on and leave it forever tyre.
I think that just builds confidence. You probably end up going faster anyway. So.
All right, welcome back to Downtime Goes Downhill. It's the middle of the season and we've just been on a 2-day team camp, so there's plenty to talk about. But first, Jonny, you're racing the full Pierce Series this year, and since we last sat down to chat, you raced round 2 in Bridgewood. Take us through it. How was the weekend?
It was really good. First time I've been back to Bridgewood in, I think it was well over 20 years. And I had an argument with one of the other participants about they'd been holding races here for, however many years, 20 plus years. And I was like, I didn't race on this hill. I raced on the other side. He's like, no, it's only ever been here. I was like, nope, it was the other side. Anyway, he went and asked Dave Pearce, and Dave confirmed what I said, that we used to be on the other side. So
and that you're very old.
I am, truly am. But we were racing on a different side of the hill, and it was a lot of fun, really good track. Not as kind of big maybe as Bala, but a lot of fun. And yeah, kept it rubber side down, didn't hurt my leg, didn't have to go to hospital. So all in all, successful week.
10th place. But how did you get on without me and Ben? Did you manage?
Oh, so peaceful. You wouldn't believe.
Excellent. Fair play. Well, last year, I think it's fair to say that we all struggled with bike time amongst many other things that we struggle with. So this year, I thought instead of racing nationals, it'd be cool to go on a 2-day team camp for bike time, get some hours on the bikes, but also to try a few things that could potentially make us faster. So for the first day, we booked a private uplift with Matt Simmons over at KFC's Bike Park. And I chose that because I think it's got a really good mixture of quality tracks that are like not super long. So they're good for testing and doing back-to-back stuff on. It also has the quickest uplift. I think it takes like 4 minutes to get to the top in the Land Rovers there now, so you can properly maximize your chance of getting a good amount of runs done. I think Matt said the record on a regular uplift day is like 27 runs, which is absolutely insane. We didn't get anywhere near to that with the amount of work we were doing on the bikes. But Ben, how are you feeling about a couple of days of like just focusing on riding and testing? It doesn't happen very often, does it? If ever.
No, it's pretty exciting. Better than a race weekend, really. And I've been pretty short on bike time this season, so I was pretty excited about it. Interested to see what he had in store for us. But also, day 2 was at Dyfi, and I've never been to Dyfi, so it was it's got a reputation. I was pretty excited about that as well.
Yeah, fair play. And I really wanted to focus on getting everyone's suspension set up as well as we could. I think, Ben, like you're quite light for how fast you are, so that makes setup maybe even more challenging. Jonny's definitely been deep in the puzzle on at least a few moments. So I thought it'd be cool to invite along World Cup mechanic and owner of RSR Bikeworks, Rich Simpson, as a little surprise for you boys. And Rich has also dropped into this chat so we can catch up with him about his involvement with those days. Rich, how are you, mate? You're at World Champs, I think.
Good, thanks. Yeah, out in Andorra at the moment, so kind of working, but no Ethan because he's injured, but helping out with the rest of the team a bit.
Good stuff, mate. So yeah, obviously, like we wanted to get you there to put some data onto the bikes and to help us get into a better place with suspension setup. Like, just talk us through a little bit, I guess, your approach to a day-to-day. Like, you do these with World Cup athletes, you do them with clients through RSR Bikeworks. Like, how do you approach working with someone to get them set up into a better place than when they started with you? Yeah. Which for Ben was a pretty bad place.
Yeah, it's quite easy with Ben. Yeah. Like you say, it's the same for everybody. Maybe not with Ethan because I do a lot of testing with him, but it's the same. Get there, fit the equipment, and then I always try and do the first run on the customer's settings. So I note all those settings down. We do a run as kind of a warm-up. Sometimes I'll make some changes after the first run. If I think something's dangerous, normally I'll change something. But really, it's that first run, get to know the track a bit. I might make a small change, but that second run is really where I'm looking at speeds and balance as well. But I also follow my customers as much as I can. Some of the faster people, it's quite difficult, as obviously. But it's more so I can kind of assess their speed, their line choice, the way they weight the bike a bit, and it allows me to make an educated assessment on what kind of compression speeds and rebound speeds I think they need, and that's based on what all the testing I've done on my own bikes to find out what compression and rebound speeds work for me. I've been riding quite a long time, so I think I've got quite good experience and kind of know how the bike should feel. And then I can follow somebody. If they're considerably faster than me, then I can adjust speeds towards that. If they're considerably slower, the same. If they're about the same speed, then I'm looking to try and get similar compression and rebound speeds.
Okay, that makes sense.
And then every run, so we do a run, I look at the data and I make small changes. I never go straight to where I think it needs to be. Sometimes you could do that, I guess, but for me, I think it's better to make those small changes so the bike becomes better as you go on and you kind of grow with the improvements, rather than going from something that's not balanced or hasn't got the right speeds to something that's much more balanced and has the right compression speeds, because sometimes it can be such a big difference. I think the bike would actually feel a bit weird the first couple of goes. So I kind of creep my way towards where I think it's going to need to be. Yeah. And as we get closer, the changes get smaller and smaller. So, like I think the last run we did with Jonny, I literally made one click change to see if that was better or worse. But I look at the data. I take the feedback from the rider first before I look at the data, so I don't get biased. And then if the data, in my opinion, if the data doesn't match the feedback I'm getting, then I'll ask a lot of questions. Never try and make somebody give me the right answer. I can see things in the data, and if they think like the fork is hard, and I can see that actually the fork isn't hard, the fork's too soft and you're sitting in too far, then rather than tell them, no, it's the other way around, I'll talk to them about, does it feel like it's diving? Is it sagging? Does it feel rough on stutter bumps or big hits? Stuff like that. So I can understand what they're saying, interpret what they're saying with the data all at the same time, really.
So you don't need to have heaps of experience, I guess, to deal with it. Like you know what questions to ask to help people explain what's going on for them. Yeah, and I thought it was cool. Go on, sorry, mate. The
minimum really is somebody can just tell me if each run is better or worse than the run before. That's the minimum I need. If they can give me more, that's great, but they don't have to. Yeah.
I thought it was cool that you used our shock pumps as well, because obviously there's a bit of variation from pump to pump. So that was a nice little bit of attention to detail.
Yeah, I think that makes a small difference. It's surprising how many people still use analog shock pumps, which Ben's laughing because he's one of them, because they're not very accurate. So sometimes I have to use my own pump. It's a bit more accurate, and I tend to test my pumps against other pumps just to make sure they all are similar.
Yeah, but I think because sometimes you're talking like a one or two psi change, I guess, can make a difference, right? Which on a analog pump gauge is going to be hard to read accurately.
Yeah, you can't see it. Like if the analog pump was accurate and you're going from 70 psi to 75 psi, then fine, maybe you can see that. But like say if you're going 71 or 72 to make that difference, that's difficult to see on an analog pump.
Yeah. How about Jesus then? Had you tested there before for data? I'm sure you've raced there in the past, but
I've raced
was it a good venue, do you think?
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's a very good venue. It's not too long, but it's long enough to get good data. And I think if you test on a track that's too long, then you just get too tired too quickly. And I think if you can ride a track that, like Jesus, was about a minute and a half, you can probably ride that 8-9 times quite fast without getting too tired. And that's kind of what I need. I need that consistency of runs. So yeah, Jesus is a good venue for that.
For sure. And it's quite mentally taxing as well, I think, because you're trying to ride consistently fairly fast. You're also trying to think about what the bike's doing. So like, I think all of us were pretty tired towards the end of the day. So yeah, finding the right length of track and the right hill to do it on, I think is pretty key.
Yeah.
Ben, we'll start with you. You'd realised the night before that perhaps your shock settings weren't quite optimised, right? Tell us about that.
Oh man, do I have to?
Yes.
Okay. So the shock and the fork went back to Fox over the off season for a service, which is very kind of them. So as a good little boy, I wound all the clickers closed, so I knew what my settings were when they went off, and when they came back, I wound them all back to where they were when they sent them off. Apart from, it appears that I didn't do that on the shock. So since the start of the season, I've been running with everything fully closed. Apart from the, I think I'd wound. It didn't feel quite right. So I'd wound the compression and the high-speed compression and rebound back a turn, I think. Which was
so you
quite
had
a
one
revelation.
click of those open. How could you ride that thing? You had a huge crash at Hampsterley, but how did you get on at the first round? I know you were still recovering, weren't you? You couldn't race because of the shoulder from the crash.
Yeah. So I mean, I think I said on for sure. I said on the group chat. Yeah, the forks feel pretty much the same, but the shock feels a bit firmer than way. The compression wasn't too bad, but the rebound was, it was like.
It was like having a block of wood in your bike, Benoit.
Measure the rebound speed in days. Yeah, so obviously,
good. So we put your
with that.
Yeah, we put your shock for the start of the day back to where you thought you'd had it all along, not where it had actually been, and worked from there. But like, how was it working with Rich and going like click by click closer to something that should hopefully be more optimum for you?
Yeah, it was an interesting process. I was like, I wasn't sure how it would be because, I think if from my point of view, suspension setup seems like quite a subjective thing. Like there's no right setup for everybody. Everybody has a different setup. So I wasn't sure how Rich would be able to like put that into action for me. But like some of the things he's been talking about, he listens to what you say. Also, he does take your preferences into account. So I'm a flat pedal rider, so that was taken into account. I do like things a bit on the soft side, so he was happy with working with all those things. It was like, and as Rich has been saying, it wasn't like he made a couple of tweaks and all of a sudden it was 50% better. Although the first tweaks probably made it more than 50% better. It was like an iterative process. So each run, it was like, how is that? Oh, I'm gonna tweak a couple of tweaks here, a couple of clicks there, one on that side, and slowly started to feel a bit better. We got to a point though where spring rates started to be a bit of an issue for my setup. So I started the day on a £300 spring. I think when I received the bike it was a 375. I'd taken it down to 350, which we had, and that had felt too firm for me, so I'd gone down to 300 and I've been working with that for like all of last season, really all the races last season on that. But Rich was started to think it was a bit slow, sitting a bit too low, and so we bumped up a spring rate to the 350, which I had, and it felt a bit better. But that's not what the data said. The data said it was exactly the same, basically.
Yeah, Rich, give us a bit of an overview on springs, right? Because they're not necessarily exactly what they say on them for starters.
No, definitely not. some springs are better than others, that's for sure. And there are some accurate springs out there, but the springs we had are kind of known to have quite a large tolerance. And on the 2 teams I've worked for GT and for Scott, we've measured the springs we use. So we actually know what rate they are rather than what's printed on there, and they can be quite a long way out. And I think that's what Ben just suffered with. The 300 gave us like 42% dynamic sag on the rear, and the 350 maybe gave us 41%. So it definitely wasn't the change we expected. So yeah, I think both those springs, I don't know what they are. If I had to guess, I'd say the 300 probably is close to 300, and the 350 is probably close to 300 as well. So
yeah, true. But you can go and get springs checked and tested, I guess, and measuring your sag is always going to be a key thing.
Yeah.
But Ben, you went home with the 375 that was initially on the bike, the 300 that you'd bought, and the 2 of the 350 spares that we had that came with the bikes as well. And you've been trying to create a little science experiment at home, right?
Yeah, like rigged up this pretty sketchy spring compressing device, and with some threaded bar and some bits of wood, and so the idea was like, assume the 375 is right, because that's an orange, slightly different
SLS ones,
spring that's allegedly better toleranced. So I sort of wound each set of springs together. So paired the springs up basically, always with the orange one. Wound them up and measured how much they deflected. It's pretty crude, and I've repeated it a bit, and you get quite different measurements each time. And you're using like a steel rule to measure the deflection. And I wanted to try and deflect them like 100 mil a pair, but I started getting scared winding it up to those sort of compressions. There's a lot of force stored there. Anyway, they do come out a bit different. I mean, this is very, very loose, but I put the 300 at about 280 based on those measurements. The 2 350s were like 330, 340 maybe. The 450 that I had as well came in at 442. So, I mean, it tells you that maybe it doesn't really tell you what they're rated at, but it tells you that they are a bit different to each other, and that the 350s are fairly close. Who knows? Like a mill's difference is £15 spring rating. So,
yeah, but that wouldn't account for the fact that you were getting similar data numbers from the bike with the 300 and one of the 350s. Rich, I think on the day you mentioned that sometimes riders can they can make body position changes almost to kind of counteract what a bike wants to do. Could there be something in that? Could Ben be like adjusting the way he's riding perhaps and just sitting further back?
It could happen. I see it more with compression and rebound stuff. Like if you put too much compression on a bike, sometimes it makes that rider push into the bike harder because they're trying to kind of get the bike to work, so they can try and sit on the front or the back end, whichever one you've upped. So you kind of get a false reading where you're expecting the compression speed to slow down. It can speed up. I haven't seen that on a spring, to be honest, and I would think like the amount of sag that Ben was getting is quite high at 40%. To go up a spring rate, I'd expect roughly every 25 pound spring rate makes about 2.5% sag difference, roughly. It's not accurate. So you'd think that if we went up 50 pounds, then he should have had like 5% less spring rate, sag, which we didn't get. We got exactly the same. So I would doubt it was overcompensating. And I think like when we did see some overcompensation with compression settings with Ben as well, when I went back to the setting before, then we got back to where we thought we'd be. So you could see it easy then. That never happened with the spring. It didn't we didn't do any runs where suddenly it was 30%. You think, okay, you're just waiting.
Yeah.
It was constantly around 40%. So
interesting.
Yeah.
So where do you go from here, Ben?
Well, I went 375, 375 on Sunday, but like without a diet, without the like kit on, it felt firm as it would, because it's now 3 steps higher than what I was on before.
You've not accidentally closed all the compression damping again,
Well,
have you?
who knows, eh? No, the compression's quite open as well in comparison. But I mean, this is like an hour on one hill in Wallcliffe, just having a tinker around, really. It felt okay, but it was by no means finalised, so...
Yeah. So basically you need another day with Rich, is what you're saying.
Yeah. Rich is like, if that guy ever comes near me ever again,
I'm busy.
run in the other direction.
Well, let's talk to someone that has that Rich has managed to spend 2 days with. Jonny, you did a day last year with Rich off your own back and kind of got the bike set up, learnt a bit about suspension, probably enough to make yourself dangerous, and then fiddled with it throughout, and puzzled and got to a place that you felt pretty good with. And I think I asked you on the morning before Richard arrived whether you were willing to go down that hole again, and you did. You jumped in with both feet. Tell us about that day from your perspective, and how you think, is it complementary having done a day already? Did you learn more? Was there more progress to be made?
I think having done a day already was a definite benefit, because I knew how Rich worked, and I was familiar with the language of the back and forth in terms of, what I was looking for on the bike, and what Rich was looking to hear from me in terms of feedback that the bike was giving. And I think each rider is different in what they're looking for and what they're feeling, and it's a case of narrowing down for you as a rider, what it is you're looking for, or what elements of how a bike is riding that you're not happy with, and then having that back and forth. So having done a day already, that was definitely beneficial, because it felt like I could slot straight back into having that conversation with Rich and hit the ground running maybe a bit quicker than you two. I don't know, maybe Rich can comment, but
I'm interested to hear your thoughts, Rich. Like, do you often see people more than once? Like, do you get people that come back, and how do you find that second day?
Yeah, most people come back when they've changed bike. Quite a lot of racers will come back each year. But yeah, I would agree it was easier with Jonny. I kind of knew what he was looking for from working with him before, although he's gone away from the no volume spaces to lots of volume spaces. So there was a bit of a change. But I know when we did the first setup, he was having problems with pushing the front in the corner, and he had the same problems this time. So it's immediate. He knew exactly what he was telling me, and I knew exactly what he was trying to tell me, so I can make that change quite quickly and try and sort it out. It definitely made it easier. And I think, like Jonny said, he knows what I'm looking for to be able to give him what he's looking for. So it does make things easier.
I think the other thing is that having Rich there gives you confidence to go down an avenue that you wouldn't normally maybe go down, and you can get bias from either friends or media as to what you think how a setting should be or a bike should behave, and it's quite easy to get married to that. So actually going through this process and trying these different things, I ended up with the rear end of the bike far quicker than I would naturally set us up. It was great though, but I wouldn't have gone there on my own. So it's a massively valuable experience.
I think that's fair to say, because I can always see on the data that I can make sure your rebound is slower at the back than it is at the front. And if you haven't got that data to be able to see that information, you're always in the back of your mind thinking, I don't want to go much faster on the back because it'll kick me out on a jump. I can see that it won't. And I can also see if it's compression that might be causing that rather than rebound. But without the data, like you say, it's difficult. You're pre-programmed that I don't want to go too fast and rebound because it will kick me forward. But I can keep going that way, and I know what becomes unsafe and where the balance becomes unsafe.
Yeah, and I think it's really easy to get lost as well. So having someone there that can help keep you on track and guide you through things you might want to try or things they think you should try, I think is really helpful. Like for me, the biggest benefit I think was getting some balance into the system. So I've often struggled on that bike specifically with getting kicked by the rear wheel. Like I've ended up shutting down high speed rebound on the back end to try and get the bike to feel safe when I'm kind of taking off. I often feel like the rear is trying to overtake the front. And I've done that by compromising on the rear end of the bike and slowing down the high speed rebound. And you, Rich, opened that back up, but counteracted it by speeding up the high speed rebound on the fork so the front and rear were balanced. So what I would naturally think, I can't ride that, it's unsafe, that's too fast on the rear, I can now ride because the front's balanced with the rear. So for me, I think like that was a big gain because I'll gain grip and I'll gain performance out of that, but I'm not sacrificing kind of risk, I guess, by not being able to hold on to the bike. So for me, that was super helpful to have you there to say, no, hang on, right, I know you wouldn't normally go there, but if we balance it out here, you'll overall have a better package. So I think that was, yeah, that sort of stuff was super useful. I don't think I'd ever get there. Like I can make an isolated change based on my limited understanding of suspension and feel. I don't think I can effectively change a system. I don't think my brain can handle that, especially without the data.
Yeah, it does. Because I think when you're trying to set your bike without data, you do tend to change just one thing at a time. But I can see from balance figures and from compression rebound speeds that I might need to slow one end and speed the other end to get the balance, which is why I only go a couple of clicks at a time. So I don't make a massive bold change that suddenly does go out of control. It's always just moving towards something, and I'll always err on the conservative side to keep things safe. I don't want anybody hurting themselves because I've just got a suspension setting completely wrong. But yeah, it's stuff you can't see yourself. And with the data, you can see those figures. You know what's going on 100%. It's not just, like Jonny said, your preconceived view of what's going to happen from what you've read.
Yeah, takes the guesswork out of it.
I think as well, there's the education side of it that goes along with it. So it's the back and forth provides you with knowledge of what you've just given some feedback, changes are made that you can see, and then why those changes being made, and then you do another run to see what effect that had. So you're gathering this information so that at some point in the future, should you be feeling a certain way on the bike, you've got some experience that you can make those changes yourself. And it's probably just going to be a click, as bizarre as that feel. Tell me this 5 years ago, one click will make a massive difference. And some of our other friends have said, oh yeah, but really, does one click actually make a difference?
Yeah, it can do for sure. And one of the things we had to test was these flow inserts from a company called TruTune, which basically replace or go along with tokens in your fork. They're a technology that comes, I think, from the automotive industry, is where they've been using it up to now. And it's like an atomized carbon inside these inserts that creates a huge surface area from, this is my basic understanding, enables the air molecules to bond to, which effectively increases the volume of your fork without, physically increasing the volume of your fork, making it therefore a bit more linear. So it's easier to take the fork through the travel. It's not kind of as harsh coming towards bottom out. It also acts as a heat sink. So when you compress air fast, it heats up. That heat will make the fork stiffer if you're trying to compress it fast. Whereas with the inserts in, that it can absorb some of that heat and allows the fork to compress faster with less of that stiffness increase. That's my basic understanding of it. And they sent us a little syringe that you could put the inserts in, and it was very obvious that they do something. Like, it was a lot easier to compress the syringe further with an insert in there, what I don't think any of us were necessarily convinced by was whether we want that behavior in our fork. Like, is that a beneficial thing? I really wanted to try it while we had the data on, and Rich was very patient and pushed me to get to a good setting first before we put that in. And I think, Rich, it was fair to say you were kind of skeptical about how that would feel in the fork. Like, but I think I came back from that first run, I personally felt like it was a better setup, a plusher setup. And I think your words were that it was the best data from my bike that we'd seen that day. Like, have you had some chance to think about what the insert's been doing and like how that manifested? Because it's definitely a bit of it hurt your brain a little bit trying to work it out, I think.
Yeah, I was skeptical. I could see from the syringe test that yes, it's definitely easy to compress and was more linear. I wasn't convinced that that's what you really want in your bike. But like you say, like before we put it in, we had decent dynamic sag out your bike on the front, on the fork, but you were getting constantly 75, 79% of your travel.
Yeah.
Pressure isn't particularly high. Like I say, the sag's okay. You did have volume spaces in there that maybe we could have taken it out, but we put that
only two though. To be fair,
yeah, right. But we put that TruTune in, which still with a volume spacer as well. So not a big change on the volume spaces, but the sag, and we kept the pressure the same. TruTune suggests to go up in pressure and change some other things, but it also gave me the ability to force more travel, so it didn't go up in pressure. I think if you had got your pressures right and you were getting your travel that you wanted, then yeah, maybe you do need to go up in pressure. But for you, we weren't getting the travel that we wanted. We did have the sag, so we kept the pressure the same. And like you say, came back from that first run, and it was the best set of data we had out of your fork. You've got good travel. You're in the 80s for travel, which is good. High 80s. So sag was good. We did have to change the damping a little bit, but within what TruTune had suggested. And it worked very well. I was surprised.
Yeah, I couldn't get my head around why necessarily you'd want it. I've been trying to give it some thought, and I guess if you're a rider at my weight and you're very fast, you're probably putting a lot more load and impact through the forks, and you're probably, bottoming it out and using all your travels, maybe not an issue. I'm not super fast, and therefore maybe that's part of it, that for a rider that isn't using the fork maybe quite as harsh or quite as aggressively as some of the faster riders, maybe it's more beneficial. I don't know, but it definitely felt like a little bit plusher, like a more supple kind of off the top, less feedback through the hands. So yeah, it was definitely something that I want to spend more time on. I have obviously rode it the following day at Dyfi. We'll talk about day 2 in a bit, but yeah, it was an interesting thing, and the other boys tried them at Dyfi, so we'll talk about that in a sec. But Rich, you spent a day with each of us. You spent 2 days with Jonny now. Like, how would you summarize it? Do you feel you've been able to help all of us get into a better spot? I definitely feel like I've got a much better balance in the bike now, and it's been really useful to get that up to a point where the bike can run certainly faster and hopefully with more traction, but not feel unbalanced.
Yeah, I think like each of you are different for sure. You'll ride differently, different speeds maybe. 2 of you on flats, 1 on clips, so everybody's a little bit different. So compression rebound speeds are slightly different, but yeah, I'd say Jonny, the first session we did a while ago, I'd say he's a lot faster since as well. So it did actually make sense to do another setup. I think the setup we got to before was on a completely different track, less hard hits, I guess. It wasn't at all rocky. It's more like soft ground. But he's got faster since, so it was quite interesting to do the work with him. His balance, actually, when we started, was very good. It's just some of the speeds were a little bit slow or a little bit fast. I think they're mostly slow, so we sped things up a little bit. So yeah, Jonny was kind of easy to work with, and like I say, worked with him before, so it was easy enough. And
his head's getting bigger by the minute.
Well, Yeah, with the first session we did, he was very much like interested in what I was doing all the time and wanted to learn from it. Second session probably knows a bit more, so there was possibly less questions.
I think time on the bike.
Yeah.
I've got a year on the bike now. Like,
Yeah.
I've probably ridden that bike a couple of, I'd done the press release day we'd done and maybe one push-up day, and then I did this day-to-day with Rich. So I've got a whole season under my belt since then.
Yeah.
And I kind of got a better feel of what I wanted out of the bike, I think.
Yeah.
So that's definitely a factor.
Yeah. And then for you, Chris, it was, like you say, it was getting that balance on the bike, I think, made the big difference. Some of the compression rebound speeds weren't far off one end or the other, and then it's just balancing the two together. So that was kind of easy and kind of rewarding to see you go faster on that run where we put the TruTune in, and it obviously worked. And I think we made one small change after that.
We did,
It was pretty good. So that was quite good. Then there's Ben.
Do you feel like you've got unfinished business with Ben?
Yeah, I do, because that spring obviously isn't right. So I do feel like we've come away still with work to do. But also absolutely astonished that he rode the bike with the settings that he had to start with. Not that he rode it so fast, which is actually quite a surprise. And worrying at the same time.
Yeah, I don't want to make him too much faster, mate.
No. But again, I think with Ben, we started on the settings that he thought he was on, well, should have been on. We made some changes from there again, but from memory, it was the other way around. We had to slow things down a little bit on the fork rebound and probably speed the rear up. But I do think we need to get that spring rate right to get a better setting. And you can also see that placebo effect, because when we did change the spring to 350, Ben came down and immediately said, yeah, that was much better in the corners. And it was only when I looked at the data, I was like, it's no different. The compression and rebound speeds are the same, and the spring sag and the travel usage was exactly the same, pretty much. So there is a placebo thing going on there that you think something is going to be better. But again, without data, you can't see that actually it wasn't any different.
So
interesting.
I'm basically left. I'm left now with no access to any data, and everything I think about the ride is completely wrong. So what do I do?
And four springs.
I think you benefit from like a magic rag or something. Just give the bike a little tickle and be confident that's made the difference.
Away we go.
Maybe I should have just told you. It was brilliant.
Yeah, it was fine.
Well, we'll have to find an opportunity for you and Rich to get together again at some point. But yeah, I guess to summarise day one, I think it was Rich. Thanks for coming, mate. It was super useful. Good to have you up on the hill, following us and heckling us and helping us get set up better. Things I've learned, that testing takes a lot longer than you expect it to. Like, even just putting all the data on the bikes is quite a complicated job. And then every run, obviously, you're kind of coming down, debriefing all the riders, downloading data, writing down all the numbers, all super important stuff. But yeah, I hadn't really thought about how time consuming some of that stuff would be. So we definitely didn't test as much as I had intended to that first day. We did enough to get to a good suspension setup, I think, but some of the other things didn't happen. So I wanted to try some weights on the underside of the bike, which we didn't get around to, and I didn't do on the second day either. But I probably will have a play if I get time before the last race. We've all fitted OChains now. We were going to try turning OChains on and off. I think everyone was so wedded to them that they didn't want to turn them off at any point. Ben, I think you were the most recent one to fit one. Have you got any thoughts on how OChain has transformed the bike or changed the bike anyway? It's kind of hard to put a finger on, really.
So the first time I rode it was on the first day, and it's a bit like you saying there's so much other stuff to be thinking about. It was just on there and I didn't really notice, which is probably, well, it's definitely not a bad thing. I left it on the whole time, didn't fiddle with it at all. Again, I've tried it on, I think it is 6, 9, 12 degrees of movement or something like that, isn't there? I've wound it back to 6 and tried that very briefly when I was fiddling the other day with the heavier spring as well. Too much going on really to draw any conclusions based on that.
Fair.
Not bad.
Yeah.
Probably good. Needs more time.
Needs more time. Yeah. Rich, have you done any data with OChain and looked at impact on what it's doing to suspension, or can you?
I have worked with a guy in the Forest of Dean. He's a young rider, but very fast, and he used to have no OChain, and we did set up on it, and he was definitely feeling pedal feedback, not excessively, but then his dad fitted a OChain for him, and he was immediately, it makes it feel like you got no chain on. It's smooth. The data doesn't become that much different.
Okay.
I think it's just that feeling you get in your feet that changes.
Yeah,
the compression
less feedback
speeds are
from
the
the bike.
same. It's just, maybe without the OChain, if the chain tightens and you get some pedal kickback, then it might restrict the travel a bit.
I just found there was less harshness through the back end, or it felt like there was less harshness through the back end of the bike when I put one on.
Yeah, it's exactly what I felt. I've got them on my downhill bike and on my enduro bike now as well, and it just takes those edges off, and it does feel like the suspension is working freely.
Yeah, even though it probably doesn't change too much what the suspension's doing, maybe, but
No,
more what you
from
feel.
what I can see, it doesn't change it that much.
Yeah,
It does feel smoother through your feet.
Yeah.
And I think that just builds confidence. You probably end up going faster anyway. So.
100%. Yeah, for sure.
Especially on flat pedals.
Yeah, definitely that helps with the flat pedal riders. We got our hands on some of the brand new Maxxis high roller tyres, which was awesome. I managed to sneak in one run at the end of the day at Caersus on relatively hard pack conditions, so probably not exactly what they're designed to perform in, but I would say it was at least as good as the DHR2 that I took off. There was no lack of grip with that thing on, and I did carry on with it in day 2 on some more tacky trails, and it definitely did seem to feel pretty good there. But yeah, let's talk about day 2. We went from like half an hour pretty much between venues. We went from dry, blown out trails to pretty wet trails at Dyfi. And Ben, your first time there, I know you were quite excited to get there. Like, obviously everyone's seen quite a lot of Dyfi. I guess a lot of the pros ride there and share it on vlogs and all sorts of stuff. How was your experience of your first time at Dyfi?
It's a unique place, I think. I spent like a couple of days after when we were home. I spent a lot of time thinking about riding there. We've talked in the past about like going to places that scare you and riding out of your comfort zone. And the first like 2 or 3 runs there, I was definitely feeling out of my comfort zone. It's fast, high speed. It's wide open in places. There's some insane technical sections. There's jumps all over the shop, basically, from every size you can imagine, to ones where you think, that's like the size of my house, that jump. And a really nice like vibe there as well. It's quite low key. There's just like the little open kind of like wood shed. That shed's a bit unfair. Like office, cafe, it's all open. The odd world champ knocking around at the top of runs, and other like ex world champs, etc. So it's just an awesome place to visit, and
Good stuff.
like all kinds of trails, really.
Good.
For you
Glad
to
you
pick
enjoyed
from.
it.
Yeah.
Nice.
Take
and
me back.
we one day we deliberately had a little bit less structure to the second day to get a bit more bike time in and to use some of the suspension work that we'd done the day before. But you guys did both try the flow inserts from TruTune on the second day. Ben, give us your thoughts first on that one.
Oh, yeah, exactly. I had exactly the same experience as you, really, Chris. Just not that the 40s feel harsh off the top, but this just felt a little bit more compliant in that first part of the stroke. Really noticeable. Well, as far as you can trust as far as you can trust your senses when it comes to suspension.
Well, yeah, Rich has told us all about you.
So I guess there's a fair bit of expectation after the day before, but it seemed to live up to that. I left it, tweaked the bit more compression, I think, a little bit less rebound maybe. Left the pressures the same, and I was getting maybe a little bit more travel, but perhaps higher speeds there. So who knows? But basically just popped it in, and it felt great, and didn't really need any tweaking with it.
Okay, fair, good stuff. Jonny, I think again you were probably the most skeptical out of the three riders, alongside Rich in skeptical levels. But fair play, you gave it a go. How was it?
Yeah, definitely skeptical. I couldn't rationalize in my head why what it did would be a benefit, a bit like what Rich said initially. However, proof is in the pudding. So I put it in, I replaced the equivalent number of tokens with it, and then I did what they recommended, which was a 10% increase in pressure, and I think slightly more compression, low speed compression, but I didn't have a great deal left to add on. So I ended up adding, so I went up from 78 to, I think I went up to 85, and then I subsequently went up to 87, and then I've subsequently gone up to 90 today.
Okay.
And the first run I did at 85, I got more, I've always complained that I never get full travel on these forks, and I got full travel on the forks, which was surprising. And I think one thing, at Dyfi, you're going really fast and there's a lot of braking bumps, and the most noticeable thing on the first run was the chatter from the fork had gone. It was really, really smooth, and I think for riders at our level, that's great, really noticeable. A full day of riding, that would massively reduce the amount of fatigue. And then on the pokier end of say racing for us, I think it would, especially say in the wet conditions, which we've had quite a lot of, you get more grip on the lower end. So I spent quite a bit of time kind of trying to figure it out in my head, and I think by adding that extra pressure to the fork, you're essentially charging this token. So you're almost negating the effect of the increase in surface area by adding more pressure. And then for me, I felt that I was benefiting from how it acted as a heat sink for increasing the speed. So I got the fork back to largely behaving how I felt it behaved before, but the small bump sensitivity in the first maybe 25% of the stroke, 30% of the stroke was far better. So pleasantly surprised, going to leave it in. So happy days.
Okay. Rich, anything to add to that? Now you've heard Ben and Jonny's thoughts on it. Does any of that kind of ring true or make sense, or do you want to challenge any of it?
Yeah, I think just what Jonny was saying then, you have got more surface area. So you have got, when you're looking at your PSI, pounds per square inch, you've got more square inches. So it kind of makes sense. You're going to go up in pressure. It would be interesting. I know I didn't send you the setup sheets before you went to Dyfi, but there is some suggestions on there for flatter, faster tracks, which would be to reduce some compression damping. I'd be interested to see how that compares with the TruTune. But like Jonny said, the proof is in the pudding. It doesn't matter if I can't work out why you'd want that. If it works, it works.
Yeah, this is it. I think all three of us were kind of like, well, it feels better. None of us can quite explain exactly why or get our head around the physics, but
yeah, it'd be interesting to see what it's like on a steeper track, because you probably want less linear fork there, so it might feel a bit divey, but then you can sort that out with compression damping. So, well, maybe Jonny can't because he's almost used it all, but everybody else can try it. But yeah, if it works, it works. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, and I think there will be some riders that it won't work for, and some riders that it will. Perhaps, I think if you really are on that more aggressive harsher impact end of riding, then maybe it's not the right technology. I don't know. It's an interesting one. I'd like to try and understand it some more.
Interesting to find out how many of them are in the forks of certain World Cup riders.
Yeah, who knows? I've not heard of much of it. But Rich, maybe you can do some sniffing around the pits. Now you know what they look like.
If I was to say the words to you, can you either confirm or deny?
There might be another World Cup rider trying them as soon as he's uninjured.
Right, okay. Well, I'll be interested to hear the feedback from said rider. Anyway, we'll see. Ben, you also switched over to that high roller tyre, I think, halfway through the day on the front end of the bike. Did you notice any difference there?
I think that tyre is like the perfect British stick it on and leave it forever tyre. So I went on at Dyfi. It's quite open. It looks more like suited to loose, softer conditions probably, but it went on at Dyfi, which is kind of slick, a lot of slick, wet rocks, roots, fairly firm surface. Didn't think it'd be ideal there, but it was great. No issues at all. And I'd run on an Assegai earlier in the day. Couldn't really feel any difference. I've ridden it up here in loose, dusty, like surface dust, gravelly type conditions where maybe Ross thought it might not be ideal, and it was brilliant. So I can only see it being great in sort of soft, loamy, muddy type conditions too. So I'm a massive fan.
Good, yeah, might be a fit and forget UK tyre, right? That would be nice.
Yeah, which is always good.
Yeah, definitely. Johnny, have you had a play with one yet, or is that still on the shelf of things to do?
I fitted them.
To start.
Yeah, they're a little bit precious from that regard compared to
fitting
the other
tyres is like suspension settings are to Ben for you, isn't it? So
yeah, that's a very good description. Although I have got a lot better this last year from some kind of extra tutelage from yourself.
You have, mate. Yeah, I've been very impressed.
However, I got a proper sweat on trying to, because they felt like they'd up their downhill casing compared with my other downhill casing tyres. I was like, okay. So they're on the set of wheels, but I've not used them.
Okay, fair play. Yeah, shout out to WeAre1. Actually, it's been super handy having a spare set of wheels each as well to be able to like do quick tyre swaps, and especially with testing. But if we have a wet race now and we've got shorties ready to go, that's going to be super helpful.
I'm working on this being sod's law that we're not going to have to use.
I mean, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with it being a dry race, to be honest. I'm totally fine with it. But anyway, we'll see.
Johnny, you can try the high roller when it's wet anyway.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly. Just keep on that tyre, I think, up to a fair, it'd have to get pretty wet, I think, before you necessarily need to switch out.
We've always gone to shorties, and then, we've been in certain places where, we've come down with shorties on thinking they're great. And then, another guy comes down with essentially dry tyres on, same pace. And he's like, yeah, they're really good. And it's so, maybe they might just be a nice interim tyre that just works in certain general UK conditions. Yeah.
Ethan hasn't had to use anything more than that high roller 3 this year at World Cups, and they've been pretty wet. So I think it's a pretty good wet weather tyre as well.
Yeah, Poland and Leger, not exactly dry. So
he did crash at Leger.
He did, but he made it a long way down the track before he did crash.
He did. Yeah, he wasn't the only one.
And he was on pace as well. So credit to him.
Yeah, fair play. Johnny, then, day 2, how did you find? Obviously, you did the TruTune change, which you're happy with, but in general, just getting some fast bike time in's got to be good, eh?
Yeah, it was just wicked. Just, riding with you guys and our friend Tim, who was joining us. It was, just a great day. Just rode a load of different tracks. Just a lot of fun. A headset kind of gave up a bit, which has been replaced since. So, but yeah. Just a nice day's riding, and I think we kind of peaked on puzzling the day before. So it was nice to kind of keep that to a relative minimum, I think. Shout out to all those boys that go back to back multiple days testing. I think my brain would probably kind of back in on itself or something.
It was surprisingly tiring, actually. Just 2 days of laps and thinking about the bike for some reason was actually felt more tired than I would expect from 2 days riding. Rich, do you get that feedback from riders when they're testing versus just like bike time, or are these athletes just a little bit better at things than us?
Some of the World Cup riders, not so much. I think probably because they're used to it and they're invested in it. But I do get feedback from lots of my customers that it's a tiring day and they're glad. We go somewhere and you can do 12, 15 uplifts in a day at Forest of Dean, and they're actually glad that we only did between 8 and 10 because they're exhausted from thinking. Like say, you're thinking about something, you're not. I try and tell them just to ride and then talk to me about the exceptions, but they can't help. Everybody wants to give great feedback, so people are thinking about the bike all the time, and it does take some energy out of them. And then they're also trying to understand what I'm doing with the bike, or I'm asking them questions and having to think more than maybe they would normally. So yeah, it's not uncommon for people to feel tired from the day's testing.
Yeah.
I think just occurred to me given the first day of testing I did with Rich, it's finding that pace that you can make the bike work hard enough for Rich to be able to do what he needs to do, but not too fast where you can no longer cognitively figure out what you're doing on the bike. Like you're going too fast and you're like, it's a blur, like a race run. It's like, I don't even remember it, to actively being able to be mindful as you're riding. So it's like that fine balance between, I've got to go fast, but not too fast. And getting that point. I think that this second day with Rich, I kind of knew what that speed was.
Yeah, 100%. I try and set people's bikes up so there is something left, because nobody's going to do 8 runs at 100% speed. So I'll set the bike with some travel left to use. The compression and rebound speeds are based on what I've used for testing, not what I've had in races. So yeah, there's something there. And like John said, if you can do 8-10 runs at 85-90%, then that's what you need.
Yeah, definitely. And Johnny, you're off to the 3rd round of the Pierce Series this coming weekend in Bucknell, I think, with your eldest son as well racing.
Yep.
Do you go there feeling more confident now with the bike time and the changes that you made?
Yeah, definitely more confident. I'm excited more than anything to ride it with these settings and make sure I've not messed too much up with that fitting this cartridge. But yeah, just keen. We had a little look at the course preview, so get an idea of what to expect. It's more making sure that my eldest is comfortable throughout the weekend, so it's not going to be like a normal race weekend for me as such.
Are you getting your excuses in now, Johnny? Is that what you're doing?
Always. I'll just pull it out of the bag for the race runs. But
we've got 2 race runs, so you can haul us then.
And I think he'll be up before me, so I'll probably go up together, and then I think it's just going to be a different practice dynamic.
Yeah,
I think
for sure.
So I'm not, kind of used to doing my own thing. Whereas I think this time I'll probably be more thorough. So it might be interesting to see how that translates to actual race runs, because I actually might ride a bit slower in practice and more deliberately. So it's just going to be slightly different. So I'm quite excited for that, actually.
Yeah, no, I'm keen to see how both of you get on. Yeah, it'd be super interesting to catch up afterwards.
30,
what about you, Ben?
30 in our field, sorry.
30?
In his field.
Juveniles. Stacked, eh?
It's a big field.
Yeah, incredible. Yeah, excited to see how he gets on. Ben, what about you? Feeling more ready to go racing now? We've got a little while left before the final round, but
yeah, we've got about a month, I think, haven't we? I'm chomping at the bit, really, thinking where can I squeeze one more race in between now and then? Because I've missed the 2 races I was booked onto. Well, the first Pierce, and then I had an enduro the week after. I missed that. There's been no Steel City this year, unfortunately, which would normally be around this time of year. So I could do with sharpening my pencil a bit, really, before the last round. But time's running out.
Yeah, fair play. Well, if people want to see how we get on at our final race together this year, we'll be at the final round of the Peer Series in Hopton on the 28th and 29th of September. Hopefully, we'll see some of you there. Come and say hello. But yeah, Rich, thanks for joining us, mate. Appreciate you sharing your knowledge and helping us get into a better spot. It's RSR Bike Works, is it, on Instagram if people want to find you, or on the internets?
Yep, RSR Bike Works, yep.
Nice one. I'll stick links in the show notes to that as well, so people can find it nice and easily. But yeah, thanks, boys. It was a fun couple of days, and look forward to closing out the season in a couple of weeks at Hopton for the last round.
Cheers, Chris. Thanks, Rich.
Thanks, everybody. Cheers.